pathogenesis.
¿Cómo están? Buenas noches.
Good evening, how are you?
Son las 19 horas
It
con un
is
minuto
19
del
hours with
miércoles
1
29 de
minute
abril
of Wednesday,
de 2020.
April
Estamos en el
29
Palacio Nacional de México,
of
en la Ciudad de
2020.
México,
We are in
y
Mexico
vamos a
City in
iniciar
the National
la
Palace.
conferencia o de
And
prensa
we
diaria
will begin the
sobre la situación
daily
de COVID,
press
la
conference
pandemia
regarding
causada
the
por el nuevo coronavirus
COVID-19 pandemic
SARS-CoV-2.
situation, which is a
Hoy
disease caused
tenemos
by the new coronavirus SARS-CoV-2.
un programa especial, un invitado muy
Today we
especial,
have a
que
very
es
special
nada menos que
guest,
nuestro jefe,
which
el
is our
secretario de Salud,
boss, the
pero también
Secretary of Health,
mi maestro
but also my
y
teacher,
uno de los inmunólogos más destacados
and one
del
of the
país y con amplio
most widely
reconocimiento mundial.
renowned
Y
immunologists
petición
that we
por
have
demanda
in Mexico.
popular nos acompaña para hablar de
And
la inmunopatología y
he will be
fisiopatología
talking
del COVID.
of the
Elemento que consideramos que es muy
immunopathology
importante
of COVID, which
porque nos va a
we consider
permitir
to be an
a
important
todas y
element
todos entender
because it will
con
allow us
mayor
to
amplitud
understand
por qué este virus
much
causa la
better
enfermedad que
why
causa
this virus
y
causes the
en qué
disease
consisten
it
las
causes,
alteraciones que
and what
ocurren
are
a
the
nivel de los
alterations
pulmones, a
that
nivel del sistema inmune, a
occur
nivel del
at the
sistema
level of our
circulatorio,
lungs, of
etc.
our circulatory
Entonces, hoy
system,
vamos a empezar,
etc.
si está de acuerdo el doctor,
So if
con su propia presentación y después
if everyone's on
abordamos el
board,
informe
we will
técnico que
begin with the
presentaría
doctor's
el doctor José Luis
presentation.
Salomía
Then we will
y
have the
finalmente el
technical
doctor
report
Ricardo
by
Cortés
Dr.
nos
José
va a
Luis
hablar de
Alomía.
las acciones
And
de
finally,
promoción y
Dr.
prevención y nos va a
Ricardo
hablar de una
Cortés
nueva
will
guía
be talking about
técnica que tenemos
some
para
of
una
the
población de
prevention
especial interés.
measures and
Doctor.
a new set of guidelines that we
Buenas
have
noches. Sí, se puede
for
hablar.
this end.
Como prefieras.
Good evening.
Prefiero ir acá. Me da mucho gusto estar con
I'm
ustedes
very pleased to be here with you tonight,
y desde luego comunicarme con los interesados en este
and of
tema.
course to be able
Les
to
advierto que
communicate
no
with
es nada fácil,
all of the
pero
people who
tampoco
have
voy a dar
shown
clases,
great interest in this
sino
topic.
a presentar,
I should warn you that this is
pues,
not an
unos
easy
cuantos de los
topic, not a simple one either,
28.492
but I'm not
artículos
going to be teaching a
publicados
lecture
en los
either.
últimos 3 meses relacionados con coronavirus.
Out
en
of the
particular,
thousands of
del tratamiento.
scientific articles
El
that have been
objetivo que tengo
published
es más o menos darles un panorama
during the last few
y
months
ver,
regarding
cómo está
coronavirus, the
el
new
sistema
coronavirus,
inmune
I'll
que es el
be just
encargado de
summarizing
enfrentar a
some of the
este
most important elements and
a
giving
este
you
virus.
a brief
Estoy de
landscape
acuerdo en
of
principio
the situation
con
regarding this
Diego,
virus.
con Adam
You will
Smith,
be,
ilustre pedagogo,
you
no sé
would
cómo
agree with
calificarlo,
me, I think, and
que
also
señala
with
que la
Adam
ciencia
Smith,
sería el antídoto contra
famous
el veneno del entusiasmo
the famous
y la
thinker,
superstición.
that science
Si
is
bien
the
no llega
antidote
todavía
against
estos
the
dos,
poison of enthusiasm
elementos
and
de
superstition.
evolución, sí estamos inmersos en mucho por la situación
And this is of great relevance to the situation that we find ourselves
ecosistema, hay que declararlo como
currently,
tal, muestra de la biodiversidad de
because we're
nuestro,
dealing with a
eh,
virus that is
nuestra
a
biología,
component of
y
our
desde
ecosystem
luego
and should
nos
be
recuerda
characterized
a la
as such,
selección natural que
and
brillantemente
it
expusiera
takes part
hace
in natural
décadas, hace siglos,
processes around us, and it of course reminds us of the everlasting process of natural selection that was
condujo a la organización de los
first
seres vivos.
enunciated by
En la siguiente
that
imagen, y voy a
famous
tratar de hacerlo rápido,
taxonomist
señala
and
cómo esta
biologist
familia
that
son
we are all familiar with.
integrantes de esta familia de coronavirus, de los cuales ya teníamos
So
tres
here we
de
have
ellos
some
presentes
images
en el ser humano.
of
Ustedes
previous
saben, el
um,
primero es
types of
SARS-CoV, que nos dio
coronavirus
a través
that
de
we
un
already
animal
knew
la
about and
capacidad
that were
de
already
infectar
present in
al ser
human
humano.
beings. First of
Después
them was
esto
the
es
SARS
primero,
coronavirus,
eh, el síndrome respiratorio agudo severo.
And this
Y
one
desde luego el segundo que ustedes
posed a
saben
danger
es
when
el
it first
relacionado
appeared
con
to human
el Medio
beings
Oriente en otra,
because it
hace 8 años,
produced
otra
acute
acción de uno de
respiratory
estos
syndrome.
coronavirus.
The
Y es
second
ahora
coronavirus
cuando, a
was the
través de
MERS
otro de
coronavirus
los elementos
that
de los
appeared in the Middle
seres vivos
East
animales que son
a few
los
years ago, as you all
de estos
know,
coronavirus desde
and
hace
now we are dealing
conocido y
with
publicado desde hace 70 años,
the
no es nada nuevo, pero ahora
new
tenemos
coronavirus,
ya
the
la llegada
SARS-CoV-2.
directa al ser humano. Y
And
esto
this
es a
is
través
the
de
first time
una
that this
mutación
new
de su genoma
coronavirus has
de todos los
arrived
genes que
into the
conducen que
bodies of
ahora
human
está
beings.
frente al
And
humano
this has to
un
do with
virus
an
con unas
alteration
características
in
que todos
its
sabemos de gran
genome,
infectividad y
and
que
that
curiosamente
had
nos ha tenido
led
en
this
unos
virus to
meses
now
ligados a todo el mundo
cause
y
great
también
consequences in
confinados
human beings,
afortunadamente a no salir de la
specifically
casa
because of
a
its
unos buenos
great
millones también
um,
de habitantes. La siguiente, por favor.
it's a very high rate of
Pero para
contagion.
poder
And
entender esto tenemos que
got so,
conocer al enemigo. Y
and
aquí
because
está
of
una
this virus, it
caricatura,
is
un
that we
dibujo
find
muy
ourselves now staying at
representativo.
home and
Estoy
abiding by a
seguro que en
bunch of regulations and
lo que va a
rules.
llegar de los niños en unas horas,
But I
ustedes dirán,
think
van a tener dibujos relacionados
it
con
is important to get to know our enemy in order to be able to face it. I'm sure that a lot of the drawings that will be sent by the children for tomorrow's conference will have some sort of illustration of the virus, such as the one we're looking at right now. And this illustration shows the different parts of the virus. And I would like to emphasize that for thousands of years, these viruses have been training, so to speak, in an incredible way, to be able to survive and defeat their enemy, which is the immune system. And how does this new virus attack its enemy, the immune system? In a very specific way. It attacks the respiratory tissue. So it enters the body in the way that it is already known to all of you. Then it goes it goes through different parts of the respiratory system, and it eventually reaches the lungs. And eventually it reaches the alveoli, which have two kinds of cells, type 1 and type 2. Pneumocytes type 1 and pneumocytes type 2. The type 2 are very important to our living functions because it allows the exchange of oxygen, meaning the entering of oxygen into our body, and then the expelling of CO2. This is the function of the pneumocyte 1, which is one of the type of cells that form the alveoli. So here we can take a look at the process just described of attack of the virus against the immune system in the form of a diagram. So basically what the virus is doing is assaulting the workshop, so to speak, that is in charge inside our body to replicate protein molecules. And by taking it by assault, by having it hostage, the virus succeeds in replicating itself. And within a few hours, and within even a day, this virus will have replicated by the millions in our system. This pathology is explained in 8 steps. So basically, we have an enzyme inside our body, which is the ECA2, that is the key that opens the door to our immune system. So what the virus does to this enzyme is that or more correctly put, the virus has been able to create its own key that opens the door to our immune system. And
específicamente sobre una angiotensina y en su nombre lo lleva, va a regular la tensión de los vasos.
as I was
Por eso rápidamente
describing,
ustedes asocian
the
que
function
la
of the
acción
ECA2
de este virus,
is
la
very
manifestación
important
clínica se
within the
exacerba,
immune system
se matiza mayormente
because it
en
has
los
a
pacientes que tienen hipertensión o que tienen algo que
regulatory
ver con
function,
este
and this is
receptor,
the
con esta
reason why
angiotensina. Y
um,
luego
the patients that
transita
have
adentro de la
hypertension, for
célula
example,
con una
which is also
necesidad,
related to this
forma
enzyme,
su capa,
have
su
great
vacuola para que no
complications
la,
when
no la
infected with
intervengan
COVID-19,
otras
or with the
enzimas,
new
y
coronavirus
esta
SARS-CoV-2.
capacidad la tienen estos neumocitos tipo 2, son transportados
Now,
rápidamente al laboratorio central, que es el aparato de Golgi, donde se van a
later,
activar
after
para
replicating,
accionar varias proteínas.
the
Producto
virus
de ello se ensamblan
continues in
a
its
través
way
de
throughout
procesos
our immune
enzimáticos de
system
integración
and through
genética,
a
varias de
number of
estas
processes,
producción, el RNA
enzymatic
se
process
replica
and
y sale
integration
nuevamente
and genetic
para poder
material integration
protegerse a través
processes.
de una de estas vacuolas. Esta
The
capacidad
virus
la tiene el neumocito, no la
acquires the
tienen otras
capacity to
células
protect
preferenciales, por
itself
eso para este camino.
to
Y como
continue
ustedes ven
its
este
journey.
camino, la siguiente, por favor,
Next
tiene
slide,
que
please.
encontrarse con las
Now,
posibilidades de ser
throughout
reguladas.
this
Y aquí
journey,
sumo, además de la patogenia, o sea, los caminos hacia la enfermedad,
and
todos
I'll
los
make a
recursos que se están
parenthesis
generando a través del
to
conocimiento para poder
to
actuar
describe some of
en
the
cada uno de estos
resources
pasos. Y
that
aquí
we have
tenemos, por
available
ejemplo,
to act
el
during
más
each of
importante
the
es actuar aquí donde está la fábrica,
stages of
donde
the
están
virus
los
journey.
elementos
So the most
específicos para
important
hacer que el RNA se
element
replique,
is to
para
act
que
early
tengamos en
to
un
prevent
día
the
1 millón
virus
de copias.
from
Y
replicating
aquí
itself.
actúa el
Because as I said, we
lipoproteavid
can
y
have
el
a million
ritonavir, que son
copies
dos
within
moléculas
just
que
a
se
day.
han usado
So we want
en
to
otras
prevent that
situaciones,
replication
digamos, en
from
otro tiempo.
happening
Y
if
después
we
el segundo,
detect it early enough.
el remdesivir,
So
que
that is
también tiene una acción ahí y
the
que
first
de hecho
resource that
es
I
novedoso,
present here in my
es uno de los que
presentation.
está más impulsado. Ustedes que ven rápidamente la noticia
We also
sobre
have
lo que el
another
doctor Fauci
resource,
del
which is the
NIH,
one
de
that
los
I'm
Institutos Nacionales de Salud de Estados
describing,
Unidos,
and number two, and
anunció
probably you
que
have
hay
seen the
mejoría con
news,
este medicamento.
and you have,
Ya
and I'm talking
previamente a
specifically
través
about
de
the
China se
medication, the
había hecho un
remdesivir,
estudio rápido
and
en
you
las
have
primeras
probably watched the news and
pacientes.
seen Dr.
Fueron varios
Fauci in the
cientos
United States,
de
who has
pacientes
announced
que
that there have been
concluyen,
some
para que no me lo pregunten, que
good
concluyen que no hay
results
grandes
with the use
avances,
of this
excepto en que en lugar de tener 12
medication.
días de
But
estancia
some
hospitalaria,
a
se
series of
reduce a
studies
10
that were
o así
carried
parecido a
out
13
in
días.
China
Pero ellos mismos advierten que
concluded
todavía hay
that there is
necesidad de
no
seguir haciendo estudios al
conclusive
respecto.
evidence that is
La
actually effective
hidroxicloroquina llega
in
en
a
una
substantial
acción
way.
más
So they
periférica,
concluded
no
that we
ligada a este
need to
ensamblaje
continue
de los viriones, y lo mismo el
testing.
tocilizumab, que es un anticuerpo que va como ejemplo a frenar lo que se
So,
está produciendo
as we
en
were
parte que son
talking
moléculas
about the journey of the virus through our
inflamación.
immune
Una
system,
de las moléculas
and
es
as I was saying, at each stage we have different windows of opportunity, so to speak, to use different medications that impair the function of the virus at the different steps of its development. Now, talking about specifically about the IL-6, which is another kind of medication used during this process, we haven't found any conclusive results when applying it to the human body. Now, we already got to meet our enemy, but now we need to get to know our National Guard. And the National Guard is very heavily equipped, and I'm talking about our immune system, of course. So, just for you to get an idea, we are exposed to a billion, actually, yeah, to more than a billion pathogens on our daily lives. We are getting in touch with all of these harmful microorganisms, and our National Guard, meaning our immune system, successfully rejects them and deals with them in a way that they don't affect our health. So they have quite a job to do, and they do it with great effectiveness. But also,
que producen
we
esas
have
moléculas de las citocinas, que son las que están dando gran
we have
inflamación.
lymphocytes in
Y
our bodies,
tenemos
and we have different kinds of
fácilmente
lymphocytes.
100,000
Um,
millones de células que producen anticuerpos y
and
10,000 billones de linfocitos T. Toda esa guardia
we
es
have
suficiente para
100,000
la
millions
mayor parte
of
de nuestros ataques, de los
of
ataques
cells
invasivos.
that
La siguiente,
produce
por favor.
antibodies in our bodies,
Y aquí está
and
una
much
tabla
more
integradora de la patogénesis hasta
lymphocytes
ahora
T
postulada.
that also help us fight
Decíamos, entra
these
por las vías respiratorias
pathogens.
superiores, eso
So
es
here we
evidente.
have the
Es el
process
sistema o
of the
órgano perfecto.
pathogenesis
Tenemos la
for
afección
the
de las
infection
vías
of
respiratorias
SARS-CoV-2.
inferiores.
So as
Y
we
por
said,
otro
the
lado,
virus enters
puede
through the
replicarse el
respiratory
virus y
channel,
salir a actuar sobre el pulmón, riñón, hígado,
and it
corazón,
can
y
act
después
first
dar
on the
esa
lungs, but then
inflamación
it could also act
importante.
on our
Entran otras bacterias
kidney, on our
aliadas. No
liver,
todos los
on our
pacientes
heart.
mueren exclusivamente
We
por
have an
el virus,
inflammatory
sino por
response
infecciones
from our system,
que se agregan,
and there are
y desde
different
luego
paths
llega a un
that
estado
this
de falla
infection
orgánica
can
múltiple. Es
follow,
un término para
um,
decir está
depending
enfermo
on the
grave del
pre-existing
hígado, del
conditions,
riñón,
the
del
pre-existing health
corazón, del
conditions
pulmón
of
y
the
hasta
patients.
del cerebro.
It can, of
Aquí
course,
entra
lead
otro gran
to
sistema de
eventual
coagulación
organ
intravascular,
failure,
lo que han encontrado
heart
en las
failure,
primeras
kidney failure,
autopsias.
even
Son
brain
de estos
failure.
pacientes donde están tapados los
We've had
vasos,
a
es
number
posible
of
que
findings
angiotensinógeno que señalaba al principio
in the first
entrada
autopsies that
de
we
virus
have
también ahí
that have
participa.
been
Y después,
carried out with
desregulando la enzima esa
fatalities related
convertidora,
to
aumenta
COVID-19,
la permeabilidad de los vasos
and
y
that
resuelven
have
el
allowed
pulmón,
us
y
to
hay un
better
desarrollo
understand
de un síndrome
this whole
respiratorio
process.
agudo importante que puede llevar a la muerte del paciente. Y por otro
Of
lado,
course, as you know,
por otro lado,
one of
debido
the
al número de virus
some of the
en
most
forma
severe
moderada,
complications of this
tenemos que puede ser
infection process
asintomático
can lead
o puede
to the
pasar
death
muy
of the
largo,
patient.
agravándose
But also,
debido a
in
las
some cases, it
comorbilidades.
is
Si es
possible
diabético,
for the virus
hipertenso,
to
etcétera, todo
present
eso se
in an
magnifica este
asymptomatic
camino y puede
way.
pasar también hacia el camino del fallecimiento. La siguiente, por favor.
Next slide, please.
Ustedes conocen esta desglose y quiero nada más
You are all
enfatizar
familiar with this
la
chart,
fase de
so I'm just going to
contagiosidad
be
que está aquí,
emphasizing
iniciando la
some
infección, el
aspects of
contagio
it.
del virus. Todos tienen una parte asintomática.
During the contagion,
Totalmente
all of the
asintomática hasta
contagions
llegar a la
have
inmunidad, que es el
an
30% de los
asymptomatic
pacientes en
phase
términos generales.
all the
Sigue el
way.
contagio, hay una fase
Then we
asintomática
have
de unos
a
4
mild
5
symptom
días, 6.
phase.
Pueden
The
tener
asymptomatic
síntomas leves o
phase
moderados y tienen
can be
inmunidad.
5 days or
Después
6
graves,
days.
hospitalización, inmunidad,
Then
y
we
los
have
más graves que
immunity.
requieren ventilación,
But
generan inmunidad,
that is
pero
in the best
varios
scenario.
de ellos mueren.
Then we have the worst scenario in which we have the asymptomatic
Como el
phase
virus
and the mild symptom phase, the severe symptom
progresión de la enfermedad,
case,
el fenotipo
and
es lo que
then
recogen
death
los
or
médicos, lo que
recovery.
recogemos en la
So
historia
these are
clínica y
different
los
scenarios that
datos
have been
que
observed
tenemos.
in
La
different
siguiente,
patients.
por
Some of them go straight from the asymptomatic
Esta es
to
una
the
lista rápida
recovery
de
and
medicamentos
immunity
ya
phase.
enunciados
Some of
y
them
solo el
show
mecanismo de
mild
acción
or
que les
severe
señalaba,
symptoms.
y
Some of them
lo
even
pongo porque
die.
hay efectos secundarios que hay que cuidar.
So taking all
Si
of
ya
this into
tenemos la
account,
enfermedad, tenemos la
we have to
infección,
evaluate
la
what is
agresión y la pérdida de
the
la
best
función de las
course of
células
treatment
del sistema respiratorio. Además tenemos y
for this
después
infection,
la
taking into
comorbilidad,
account
o sea, que
different
es diabético, hipertenso,
different
tiene problemas renales, etcétera.
conditions
Tenemos
that the
efectos
patient
secundarios que hay
might
que
have,
cuidar.
because all
Muchos
of
de
these
estos pacientes
courses of
reciben
treatment
hidroxicloroquina,
could
lo
have
pongo así
potential
rápidamente, tienen problemas
secondary effects
cardíacos
or
y
unwanted
otros que tienen
consequences for the
graves
patients.
acciones y
For
desde luego
example,
hay que cuidarlas. Entonces,
hydroxychloroquine
moraleja aquí
has a
es que
number
es
of
complicado y nos
secondary
lleva a
effects
no tener
as an
en ningún
immunosuppressor
lugar
in the body. So we have to be
un
aware of who we are
elemento
prescribing these
directo
medicines
de cuál
to,
es el
for example.
tratamiento a seguir.
So
El tratamiento
there is
se sigue
no,
con condiciones generales
and
de
I want to
mejoría
be
de
very
la
clear
ventilación
about,
y además
there
de
is
lo que
no
está
set
sucediendo
way
en
of
nuestros órganos.
treatment,
La
there is
siguiente,
no
por favor.
set course of treatment for this infection.
El punto de
It has to
aquellos
be, in
pacientes
those
que
cases that are
tienen
severe, it has to
hipertensión,
be
que usan
formulated and
antihipertensivos, es
designed and
importante
implemented, taking into account the
poner
specific
rápidamente.
conditions
Esa
and the
enzima
developments of the patient.
debe no bloquearse, sino esa enzima debe seguir en el paciente hipertenso con el tratamiento que está siguiendo.
For example,
El paciente
talking about
hipertenso que se
hypertense
controla bien la
patients,
presión arterial
those hypertense
es
patients
algo que sustenta
that have
una
their
mejor
tension
evolución.
under
La siguiente, por
control,
favor.
This is a good factor for the control of a COVID-19 potential infection. It is better than those hypertense patients that do not have their tension under control. Also, I want to talk briefly about the
hacer una adecuación de lo que está sucediendo en la coagulación. Existe poca evidencia para considerar que
the risk of thromboembolism, meaning that we have to be aware of those patients who have pre-existing cardiovascular conditions, so we don't prescribe medicine that could potentially lead them to having affected their heart function. So, we don't have enough scientific evidence to either warn against or to promote any of these medications that we are showing. And these are just some examples. Hydroxychloroquine, Redesmir, etc. I want to be very clear about this. There is no scientific evidence that any of these medications can be an effective way of treatment for COVID-19. And we also haven't had any scientific evidence proving that any medication is an effective and safe way for treating COVID-19 in a way that it could become a standard treatment. So we still need to continue monitoring and developing. That would be all for me, for my presentation. Thank you very much, Dr. Jorge Alcocer Varela, Secretary of Health. Before going into the Q&A period, I'm sure you'll have plenty of questions regarding this topic. I would like to ask for Dr. Alomia to present the technical report.
Estamos en el día 38 de la Jornada Nacional de Sana Distancia, hoy día miércoles 29 de abril.
Yes, we are at the...
Este mes.
Today is April 29th. We're about to finish this month. And, well, okay, as always, we will start with the international landscape. What has been the progression of the pandemic worldwide? As you know, we continue to observe a decrease in the active pandemic worldwide. We are at 37% right now. And the proportion between the Americas and the European region somewhat stays at the same level. We are at a 40.3% of representation in the Americas, and the European region went down by a percentage. It is now at 39%. Representation. The national data we have to this day, up to now, 17,799 confirmed cases, but out of these, only 5,444 are active cases, meaning the ones that have showed symptoms during the past 14 days. We have 13,268 suspect cases and 1,732 unfortunate fatalities. We also have over 50,000 negative cumulative cases, and in total we have studied almost 82,000 patients since the pandemic started. Here we have the burden of disease distribution per state. As you know, there are some states that show a more intense coloration, which reflects they have a higher concentration of the disease. So, but we continue to see some variation across the country regarding the burden of disease. Here we can take a look at the same distribution, but presented in the form of a bar graph, so you can have access to the raw data, to the raw numbers. Here we can focus on the active pandemic in our country, which is 5,444 active cases. And we see how some states start to show a more visible color scale, meaning they have a higher concentration. Specifically, Mexico City now appears in darker red, And the usual suspects, the usual states continue to show important levels such as Sinaloa, Jalisco, Baja California, and Quintana Roo. Here we have the same numbers presented in the form of a bar graph, and here we can look at the active incidence rate, right? So here we have the active case cumulative incidence rate, which, remember, it is the number of active cases per 100,000 inhabitants in each state of Mexico. Of course, some states appear now in darker shades of green, which shows that there has been an increase in the effect of the virus within these states. Here we have the data for the same data presented in the form of a bar graph. Next slide. Here we have the fatality distribution per date of death. As you know, the dark blue accounts for the confirmed fatalities so far, and the yellow parts account for those suspect fatalities that are still waiting to be confirmed or denied as COVID-19 related fatalities. So far we have 152 suspect fatalities, and it is more than possible that at least half of these 152 will eventually be confirmed to be COVID-19 caused. Now we have the fatality distribution per state, and as you know, the yellow bars or the yellow fractions of the bars represent a potential increase in the following days as we see some of these suspect deaths confirmed. Here we have the pandemic curve per date of beginning of symptoms, and we are dividing between confirmed cases, which appear represented in red, and suspect cases, which appear represented in yellow. And again, it is more than, now if we take into account the current positive result rate is near half, it is more than possible that half of these suspect cases will be confirmed as positive cases during the upcoming days. We should take this into account when observing the trend, which continues to be an upward one. We have the confirmed case cumulative curve. As you know, up to now we have 17,799 confirmed cases. We've had 1,047 cases, new cases confirmed in the last 24 hours, which accounts for 6.3% of the overall of the total amount. And on the bottom, we can see the little orange bars, which represent the daily new cases. Now here we have the availability of beds throughout the country, of hospital beds. We have also the number of hospitals that reported their bed availability. Out of the 669 medical units that can notify now because they have a username and a password on the system, we had 588 medical units who actually reported, so 88% of them. 88% notification rate. And what did they notify? Well, that we have 13,744 available hospital beds, and out of these ones, over 4,000 were occupied. That was the national landscape. Here we have the state distribution. We can see how the occupation rate has gone up in Mexico City. It is now at 60%.
Y bueno, pueden
followed
ustedes
by
ver
Baja California with a
el porcentaje de
44%,
ocupación para cada
the
uno
state
de
of
los
Mexico
de las entidades
with
federativas que nos han notificado.
41%, all
Y
the
en la
way to
siguiente
Quintana
y
Roo
última
that
diapositiva
has a
vemos
2% occupation,
también la
with a national
disponibilidad de
average of
ocupación, pero ahora sí de
23%
las camas
occupation.
críticas, es decir, de aquellas que cuentan
That was
con
the
ventiladores, que
general
cuentan con
hospital bed
funcionarios e
occupation.
insumos para poder
Here we're
atender
looking at the
a estos pacientes, y vemos
at
también
the
cómo
intense
hay
at
un
the
incremento
ICU
en la Ciudad de México
bed
que ahora pasa al
occupation, those
51%
beds
para
that
esta
have a
disponibilidad,
ventilator available,
seguidas de
and
Baja
we are at
California,
a
San Luis Potosí
51%
y
occupation in
México,
Mexico
el
City,
Estado de México, que
followed by
tiene
Baja
arriba
California,
del
which
40, del
stands with a
40 o arriba del
44%,
40% de
all the way
ocupación
to
de estas camas, ¿no? Vemos también cómo se
Tamaulipas, which is at a
comportan
2%.
los demás estados.
We will
Y
continue to
terminamos
monitor
diciendo que
these
precisamente para
numbers.
poder mantener estos porcentajes de ocupación en
And
niveles que siempre dejen camas disponibles, es decir,
we would like to emphasize
contribuyan
once
a que
again that
exista
in order to
porcentajes de
maintain these
disponibilidad, pues
occupation
tenemos que
levels,
seguir
meaning
quedándonos en
to
casa
always
mientras la
have
Jornada
available
Nacional de
beds,
Sana
both
Distancia dure,
general and
porque es la
intensive
única
care
manera en la
unit
cual
beds
podemos
for any patients who
detener
may
la
require them.
transmisión,
It is
disminuir el
very
número
important, it
de
is of
casos
the
y
utmost
contagios,
importance
y
that
por lo
we
tanto
continue
disminuir
to
también
stay
la
home
carga de
and
pacientes
continue
graves,
to
que en su
abide
momento son
by the
los que
measures
terminan
of
demandando
the
este tipo de atención.
National
Muchas
Safe
gracias.
Distance Campaign.
Gracias,
Thank you
gracias,
very
doctor
much.
José Luis
Thank
Alomía.
you, Dr.
Le
José Luis
pido al doctor
Alomía.
Ricardo Cortés si nos comenta sobre la guía nueva. Y
Now, Dr. Ricardo Cortés, you have the floor. And we take a look at the slides.
Above 40% occupation rate for those beds. We can also see the behavior for other states. And we'd like to close saying that to be able to continue to maintain these percentages
secretario, subsecretario.
so that
Es
there
para mí
are
un
always
placer
beds
y un
available,
honor presentar esta guía
we
para la
want to make sure
protección de la
we
salud
have
de las personas con discapacidad
percentages.
en el contexto de COVID-19, con el apoyo
Okay,
del Consejo
that's how
Nacional
we're
para la
going to
Prevención de la
be able to
Discriminación,
do that. So,
CONAPRED, y el Consejo
in terms of
Nacional
description
para
from
las personas con
CONAPRED
discapacidad,
for people
CONADIS,
with
y el
disabilities,
apoyo
we need support from civil
organizada a través
society.
de
We need people
Movimiento
to be organized.
312
We have a movement called
y
312
otros
and
bien
other collectives.
de en la
And
mayoría
we also
de
have
personas
specialists
con desarrollo. Esta
who know how
guía
to deal with
es útil
issues
tanto
related to
para
people with
personas que viven con
disabilities.
discapacidad,
So
personas que
people
viven
who
con
live with
discapacidad,
people
así
who
como
have
para el
disabilities,
personal
for
de
example,
salud
people who take care of
que
them or
pueda
who are health
leer esta
professionals in
guía, que
these
deba leer
situations.
esta guía
We want to
y
make sure
que
that
le va a
they can
servir
download
mucho
this
para
guide and read
cuando
it, and it's going to be
reciba a
very
una
helpful
persona con
for them.
discapacidad
So if they have
de la
someone who
atención
has
del
disabilities, they're going
coronavirus.
to be able
Nos
to
parece
know
que
better
uno
how
de
to be
los
able to help them.
principales
One
de
major
esta guía,
success that has
la
come from this
conexión que
guide
hay sociedad
is
civil
the connection that
para poner
happens
un
between
ejemplo,
organized
es
civil
una asociación
society.
civil,
One
intérpretes de lengua
example
de señas
is
mexicanas que ponen a
the Mexican
disposición
Sign Language
números
interpreters who have
telefónicos
made
para WhatsApp,
themselves
para
available. They've
videollamadas,
made themselves
puedan
available by video
interpretar lo que
call
una
on
persona
WhatsApp so
con
that they can
discapacidad
interpret
auditiva
for people who are
pudiera
deaf or
estarle
have
expresando
some
de
sort of
salud y
hearing
que no se
disability.
puedan entender
They'll be able
al WhatsApp
to
de estas
call
personas
on a video,
interpretadas
they'll be able
como
to use a
intérpretes de
WhatsApp
lengua de señas
video
mexicanas,
call
y
and
así
have
se puede
access to a
generar
Mexican
una
Sign Language
atención
interpreter.
como la
This
que
is the
vive
kind of
con
attention
discapacidad,
that
o a lo
anyone
mejor
who has
una
a
persona que
disability
vive con
deserves to receive.
discapacidad y
Or
a
if it's
alguien
someone who
grave
lives
para
with
poder
somebody else
explicar
who
cuándo
has a
empezaron los
disability,
síntomas,
they can talk
poderle
about
dar
when their
saberes a
symptoms
estas
started,
personas.
what
Es
their
un
symptoms
honor
are,
y un
and
privilegio.
that's
Habíamos
how they
invitado
can get
al
information. It's an
licenciado
honor
Ernesto
and a
Rosas a
privilege to
esta
have
sesión para presentarla en
Mr.
conjunto con
Rojas
nosotros.
here
Ernesto participa
to
con
present
Movimiento 312,
the next
pero
information.
Ernesto
He was part of the 312
vive
movement.
también con diabetes y
Ernesto
él
has diabetes,
muy razonablemente y
and
respetuosamente hacia su persona, primero me cuido yo
respectfully
y así cuido a
to
los demás,
him, he
dijo, no
was
puedo
saying,
asistir,
you know,
debo
I can't come
quedarme
because I
en
have to
casa.
take
Le
care of
agradecemos
myself.
mucho,
I
Ernesto,
have
a
to
todas
stay
las personas
home.
que
So,
participaron
Ernesto,
y es
thank
cuanto.
you very
Muchas gracias.
much. Thank you for your
muchas gracias,
participation.
Thank
you. Thank you,
quedé sin
Dr.
sonido.
Ricardo Cortés.
Vamos a abrir a
Oh,
preguntas
didn't
y
have sound there
respuestas.
for a
Usted,
second. Question and
Fernanda,
answers, Q&A.
usted ya
You,
participó ayer.
Fernanda,
Vamos a darle
you
la oportunidad
participated
nuevamente.
yesterday. Let's give the opportunity
Árbitro
to
Alcocer,
someone
para
else to
Inmunía.
participate.
Doctor Alcocer, nos da mucho gusto tenerlo
Dr.
en nuestras reuniones.
Alcocer, oh,
Ojalá
it's
lo
great
podamos
to
tener
have you
más
in our
seguido.
meetings. I hope you can be here more
Con
often.
respecto a la semana de vacunación que se está presentando
In
en las
terms
Américas,
of
existe la
what's going
reflexión
on
de
in
qué
the
actividades se están
Americas
haciendo
right
para no
now, what
solamente tener la
activities are
prevención
being
de esta
carried
enfermedad
out,
en particular,
not
sino
just in
también
terms of
no
this
perder la
virus,
protección
but not
las
losing
otras. Y si nos
protection
pudiera
that we
detallar un
have
poco más
against other
acerca del
viruses as well.
tratamiento
Could you talk
plasma,
to us a little
que
bit
es el
more
que
about what's
aparentemente
going on
tiene
with
mayor avance para
plasma,
tratamiento
since there have
COVID-19?
been greater advancements with that
Sí,
related
muchas
to it?
gracias.
Yes,
Efectivamente,
thank you.
estamos
Yes, we are following that closely. It would be incongruent for us not to. So this, I call this an unexpected visit, but here we are with good and bad opinions. There are needs, and we're trying to cover them in general terms. And this includes vaccination. This includes all the follow-up protocols for this situation. In terms of plasma, it's something that if we could have it at the moment when we do manage to have a nice idea about how we can cover problems if we don't have a vaccination. Now there is a similar mechanism, but it still doesn't have all the fine tuning that it needs to. But we do need plasma donors. What happens is that this plasma inhibits the virus. And that works to eliminate it. It's a neutralizing antibody. Not all people who have had the virus deal with this in the same way. The immune system is unique, and because of biological factors, perhaps limiting factors, just like I was talking about the National Guard, they're acting against the virus and they have to act on other matters as well. In some areas, the answer has not been enough. That's why we're going to keep following up. And this is why we've had messages where we've talked about health being the most important thing. If we take care of our health, we can address millions of antibodies that are around. But if we have if our immune system is weak, I mean, that's going to make it difficult to deal with this. For example, if we have diarrhea, the same parts of our immune system that are protecting us against that are not going to be able to protect us against other problems. Now we're talking about parts of our immune system that have a memory. This is very important. The memory of our immune system. And that's how we make history with immunity. It's possible that we could be more protected before we have a vaccination. So young people, people who have a more complete immune system, they don't have chronic diseases, these are the people who are going to save us and be creating that herd immunity that we've heard about. So that treatment that you were talking about is one that exists when we can fine tune the details ahead and hand in hand with other things as well. Thank you, Doctor. Fernando, then you and you.
Buenas tardes.
Good
Fernanda Mendoza
afternoon.
para el canal
Fernanda
Glucosa
Mendoza
Atómica.
from
Le quería preguntar,
TV.
¿por qué es difícil
I
encontrar un
wanted to
medicamento
ask
que sea
you, why is it
100%
hard
eficaz
to
en la
find
erradicación del virus
medicine that
y qué
has been 100%
características debería de
efficient in
tener este, por así
eradicating this
decirlo, para
virus?
que sea ideal y sea seguro y
How can
curativo?
we
Y
find
además eficaz.
something
Si pudiera
safe,
comentarnos
efficient,
sobre esto y
and
relacionarlo con lo que acaba de
scalable.
explicar el
And
doctor
how can we
Alcocer. Y
relate
una
that
más,
in
debido
terms
a la
of what the
tormenta de
doctor
citoquinas
just
que se
explained?
desencadena, ¿es
I
seguro
also
utilizar
wanted to talk about the
corticosteroides para el
chain
tratamiento
and
hacia COVID?
cortisol
Gracias.
steroids. Would those be useful for
La
dealing with
última
COVID?
es,
The last
como siempre,
question
la
was
cortisona, el esteroide de la
cortisone.
cortisona en sus varias
Cortisone
presentaciones
steroids
es
in its
un
diverse
medicamento
presentations are
notablemente
medicine
importante.
medications that
Si
are
en un
very
momento no se
important.
pone, el paciente puede morir
If
ante una
patients
situación.
don't
Si se pone en
receive their
exceso,
medicine, they
sabemos
could die.
muchos de
If
sus
they get
efectos.
too much, there's
Aquí
also a
en
poor
un
effect.
principio, analizando los casos de China,
At
se les
first, we
ponía dosis
analyzed
altas
some
de
cases
cortisona
in
debido a que
China
se
and they
encontró
were injecting
inflamación.
high
Y después se
doses
vio
of
que este
cortisone.
factor condicionaba la no
But
respuesta y la
we
necesidad
saw that
de
there was
antes
not
usar
a positive answer
el equipo
with
de
this.
el,
And
el equipo tanto de la tensión del oxígeno
also that
como el
because of the
ventilador.
oxygen
Por lo
levels
tanto,
on ventilators, there was some issue
rápidamente
there.
la conclusión es
Now,
usarlo
quickly, my conclusion
después
is
cuando hay
that you
evidencia de la
use it
inflamación y tenemos
after
exámenes
that
de
we
laboratorio muy
have
sencillos que
evidence, and
nos
we have
orientan,
very
no son
simple
nada diagnósticos,
laboratory
nos orientan
exams. They're not
y entonces cuando se usa
diagnostics,
cortisona,
but
pero no en dosis
we
grandes
do
porque las
have
dosis mayores
information
cambian
on the
mucho el sistema
cortisone
inmune, por
use, but
ejemplo,
not in such
aplanan la
high
posibilidad de
levels
producir los
because it
anticuerpos
does
IgM que
flatten the
son parte
ability
de lo
to
que podemos
produce
nosotros
CM
tener para medir
antibodies.
la inmunidad,
So we don't
que
have
no
the
se mide
ability
en
to
todos los
measure the
casos.
immunity
Hay
because it's not
enfermedades
even measured in
que
each
nunca,
case.
nunca
There are
producen
diseases that
anticuerpos
never
y se tiene
produce
que buscar
antibodies. You
otras
have to look
herramientas
for other
diagnósticas. En
tools
este
or
caso sabemos que
diagnostic
sí se
tools.
eleva la
In this
inmunoglobulina
case,
M, que es por la
we
IgG,
have
y
seen
se da una
that
connotación
that
general de
this
que hay
has proven to
respuesta
be positive
inmune.
in some
Pero eso es
ways, that there has been
diferente
some
a
response
inmunizar,
from the immune
a estar
system.
listo para que si viene
But
otra vez
we
el
have to
virus y
be
es lo que
ready
pasa
just in
cuando
case the
regresa,
virus comes
vuelve a
back
contarse.
again.
No se han
We
generado
have
las
to know,
células de memoria. En ese
have
tiempo, las
have the
células de memoria
cells,
llevan
have the
su tiempo y
memory
requieren todo un
cells been
mecanismo que no
created
se conoce
because
frente al
they
virus.
require time to get this all together.
Gracias, doctor.
Thank you, doctor.
¿Qué? ¿Perdón?
Sorry?
No hay uno porque
Why why isn't
no ha
there
habido el
medication?
suficiente tiempo
Why? Because
y
there
los
hasn't
que se han
enough
usado
time
son
hasn't passed. And
experiencias
the
de
ones that
otras
have been used
enfermedades y
are
en
from
otras épocas.
experiences with
Y desde
other
luego,
diseases and at other times.
tecnológicamente tenemos
So
muchas posibilidades, pero no es
technologically,
que
we have
haya
a lot of possibilities.
imposibilidad tecnológicamente,
It's
sino
not that it's
ubicar
technologically
directamente qué
impossible.
es lo
It's
que
not that. It's
a
that
este
we
virus
really
lo
need to
neutraliza, que
identify
origen los
exactly what
anticuerpos,
is going to neutralize
que puede ser en
this
el
virus.
otro
We've said that
proyecto,
it's
y desde
antibodies.
luego, pues eliminarlo
And so
tempranamente,
from
que eso
there,
es
we want
todavía más
to
complicado. No
eliminate it
existe
as
por eso
fast
una
as possible.
propuesta
And that's very
novedosa.
complicated. And we don't have any
Gracias, doctor.
proposals in place for
Adelante.
that right now.
Usted.
You.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Doctor López-Gatell, usted ha
Dr.
comentado que
Lopez
el factor
Gatell, you have
multiplicador de
talked
casos
about the
confirmados
multiplying
puede variar
factor
en el
in
espacio y en el
confirmed
tiempo.
cases and
Quiero
that this can
preguntarle si
vary
ya
in
se ha
space and time.
modificado
And I'd
en
like to
esta
ask
fase
you
3
if in
y de
phase
cuánto sería
3 that
ahora la
has
cifra, por
changed
favor.
and what would
Doctor
the
Alcocer,
number be
siguiendo
now.
con el tema del
Dr.
tratamiento,
Alcocer,
ya que
in
no
terms
hay
of
uno
treatment,
estándar para atender a los
since there
pacientes con
isn't a standard
COVID-19,
to treat
cada uno de los
patients with
pacientes
COVID
se
19,
atiende con algún
each
fármaco
patient is
dependiendo de sus
attended
comorbilidades y de
to
su
with
propia
different
historia médica,
medications
digamos.
according to their
Y
medical
quiero
history.
preguntarle también si,
And
ya
I
que nos
also wanted
explicó
to
que
ask
incluso este
you
virus
if
puede
you had
dañar
explained if this
pulmones,
virus can
hígado,
damage your
riñón, o sea,
lungs
otros
or
órganos,
your
si los
kidneys or your
pacientes que se
liver.
enfermen de este
And if
virus y
patients who
tengan
get
una
sick
enfermedad
with this
grave o a lo
virus
mejor
and
no
they
tan
have a
grave y se
serious or
recuperen,
not so
si pueden
serious
tener
disease and they
secuelas
recover, could it
importantes
come
como,
back?
no sé,
Could there
fallas
be
renales o
would they have
cardiopatías
kidney
adquiridas. Parece que hay
failure
algunos
or
registros en otros
heart
países y qué
arrhythmia?
estrategia estarían
What
diseñando para
strategies
entonces
are you
atender a
designing
los
to be
pacientes con
able
esas secuelas.
to
¿En qué
attend
momento
to
se les da de
patients with
alta?
these
¿Cuando ya
problems?
no tienen el virus o hasta que, por
Are
ejemplo,
you going
están
to deal with
sin
them when they
secuelas?
don't have
Gracias.
the virus
Sí, gracias.
or not?
Muy rápidamente para que tengan
Quickly,
otros
quickly, just so
oportunidad de
that there
preguntar.
are other questions
Esto,
from
como
other
dice
people.
muy directamente, muy
As you were
claramente,
saying very
lleva a que cada
directly,
paciente, y es en general en la
each
medicina,
patient,
no existe una enfermedad, sino
there
existe un
is
paciente, y el paciente
the
por lo
disease
general
doesn't
coincide
exist.
en los tratamientos,
Patients
pero siempre hay,
exists. And
hay
we're able
particularidades.
to
Y en
treat
este
them in the
caso
same way, but
está
there are
acompañado de una
particularities
de las
with
enfermedades
every patient.
o
we have to see if an effect from some medicines have the same effect on different patients. But mainly, and in 80 to 90% of problems that aren't related to other diseases, it's in the lungs. It's not being able to breathe. It's the difficulty to be able to breathe. And then that extends and goes on to other parts of the body. For example, if you have blood coagulation problems, then you would start using another type of medication that wasn't an anticoagulant, but that maybe you were using it in lower doses. For example, we have some other medications that are used in all kinds of viral situations, and they help to prevent future complications. Because it's like you said, maybe they're going to have kidney failure or other types of serious problems. This is a complexity, it's not just the lungs. Have information about other effects or consequences? Yes, perhaps the patient and that person who has a higher grade of this, they want to get ready because maybe some other tissue is not going to be working, and maybe that's a problem that they had before. Perhaps it's a muscular problem, a heart problem, or in other tissues, but there isn't a defined pattern here except for the microvascular effects and thrombosis. But besides that, there are many possibilities.
Gracias, doctor. Adelante, por favor.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Factor.
Has that changed in phase three? Was there a multiplier? Because the cases you were saying could be multiplied by 8.8, the cases? The sentinel surveillance. Next Friday, not tomorrow because that's Children's Day, but next Friday, we're going to again present that graph, the cases on it, and I would be very happy to explain to you that sentinel surveillance. Oh, good afternoon, everyone. According to what I've heard, it seems like there are measures being taken to deal with this in terms of medicines to use. Now, we have seen some little videos on oncology with recommendations for what we can be doing because, I mean, health is a massive sector. It's not just about medicines, we need mental health as well. And I wanted to ask you one question. Depending on the answer, I might go on to a second question. Do you have a design or strategy to, in a tangible way, help people with their mental
Gracias,
health?
doctor.
Thank you.
Hay antecedentes, exacto.
Background. There's a lot of background.
Invitado en dos
We've
ocasiones,
invited
digo,
on two
con mucho
different
gusto volvemos a invitar
occasions
a nuestro equipo
our team
de salud mental,
for mental
que
health.
nos
And you
sentimos
know
muy
what? We can
orgullosos y
ask them to come
contentos, el
again.
doctor Juan Manuel Quijada, la
Dr.
doctora Lorena
Juan
Rodríguez
Manuel
Flores, el
Quijada
doctor
and
Gary Savicki,
Dr.
el doctor Julio,
Quijadas
Jorge Julio,
and Dr. Jorge
González
Julio
Olvera,
González
entre
Olvera,
otros varios,
among
Evelyn
other
Barragán,
many other
Diana
people,
Tejadilla, etcétera.
Diana
Yo creo que vamos a
Tejadilla
tener una
and
nueva
more.
sesión con
I think
ellos
we should
y
have another
explicamos
session
nuevamente
with
los
them so that we
distintos
can
recursos que se
again
han planteado
explain
para
the
la salud mental.
numerous
Ha habido
resources
capacitación al
that we have
personal
for
de
mental
salud,
health. We've
ha
been
habido
training
estrategias de contención, el
health,
propio
essential
número
healthcare
de atención
professionals.
que ha explicado el doctor
And
Ricardo
Dr.
Cortés,
Ricardo Cortés has also
800 0044
explained
800. Una porción
800,
importante de las
the 1-800 number
llamadas
that
que
you
se
can
hacen
call.
son por asuntos de
It's
salud
important
mental,
to understand that
contención
these
emocional y
calls
otros
are
aspectos.
to help you
Pero
with
ya
your
toca,
mental
vamos a
health,
hacer una
your
actualización y se
emotional
explica.
health, and we're going to update that and explain it to you again. I have been in charge of designing a psychology program, and I would really like to join you in this struggle together because in under these conditions, maybe you could give me
Ahorita al final,
authorization
con mucho
to
gusto
give
lo
you
decimos, con mucho
the
gusto.
handout
Gracias.
that I
Vamos a
have.
darle la palabra
Yes,
a
when
usted
we end, we
y
will
a
take your
la
handout.
compañera y al compañero de allá atrás.
You and then you.
Lo están limpiando. Bueno, le
Oh,
comento mientras, ahorita
they're
me lo
cleaning.
pasa con mucho gusto.
Okay, yes, pass that to me. Yes. Yeah. In general, yes. We welcome whoever wants to join us and help right now. Good afternoon, Liliana. Liliana, how is the vaccination in terms of herd immunity? Can you tell us how that works if we don't have a vaccination? And my second question is, are we all asymptomatic patients? I mean, I hope not. Were we? Are we?
No, la respuesta inmune es más amplia,
Well, the
la
herd
situación
immunity
del rebaño,
question is a
como se
bit
dice, es
broader.
parte de ello. Tenemos
But as
un
you
grupo de
said, herd
gente que
immunity
está
is part of all
recibiendo
of this. We have a
virus,
group of people
que está
who are
reconociéndolo en toda esa maraña de células y empieza
working with
a
us
protegerse
on that to
produciendo
see how they can
moléculas. Las más
reduce
conocidas son
molecules, the
las
ones that best
inmunoglobulinas, los
known, or the
anticuerpos, y esos son
immune
parte
globulin
de lo que le
antibody
señalaba yo,
molecules.
que se guardan
And,
en la
and what I
memoria
was
y
saying is
dentro
that
de un año
in your muscle
vamos a
memory,
tener
in
un
your
espacio
body
de
memory,
meses, posiblemente nada
the
más,
body
o
remembers
menos
this.
inclusive, no sé cómo está
Maybe
sobrepuesto
in a
esto
couple of months, we don't know how
epidemiológicamente,
long,
donde el virus ya no
epidemiologically
está
speaking, but we
activo,
see
ya
that
no
the
tiene
virus
presencia, pero
could
no
no
se ha
longer
ido.
be
Hay
present.
enfermedades
It
que
isn't
tienen
that it's gone,
50 o
it's that it's
80
not
años y
active.
está el virus,
Sometimes
otro
viruses
virus, ahí
are
presente, lo está
dormant for
viendo
50 to 80
y ahí
years
se
and they're
queda. Y en
protected in
este
the
caso,
tissue and they
y
stay
también
right
lo
there.
tenemos del
And
ejemplo
in this case, and we also
de
have
los
the
diferentes virus
example
de la influenza,
of
hay,
different flu
pero son tantos
viruses,
los virus
there
de
are
las
just so many
enfermedades
viruses,
respiratorias
especially for
que se protege
respiratory
para un grupo de ellos.
diseases,
Y en este
is that
caso,
we get
con
protected
esta
from one group of them.
experiencia que
And
se está
so, in the
teniendo
experience that
en
we're
estas nuevas
having right
células de
now
nuestro
with
organismo
these
que están
new cells in our
integrándose para
organisms that are
contrarrestar al virus,
integrating
va a
to
quedar
be part of
residuo.
the
¿Qué
virus,
tan
that's where we
potente,
get that
qué
immunity.
tiempo
How
y
powerful
cómo y
is it,
por qué
and how
unos sí
long,
y otros no?
and why
Entonces,
some and
esas son
others no?
preguntas que las tenemos que
Those are
ir,
the
las
questions that
están conociendo
we
y se
have to
tienen que ir
ask, and we
sustentando. Y
are
dentro de un
asking, and we
año
have to continue to
vamos a
ask
tener
them.
nuevamente la presencia del virus
But again,
y
we
en algunos de
are
nosotros,
probably going to have the
espero que
virus
yo sea uno
inside
de
of
ellos,
ours. I
ya
hope I'm one of
protegidos,
these
no
people who is
sabemos, pues
protected. We
podemos
don't
tener
know,
anticuerpos y
but
salir
we could have
avantes de eso y
antibodies
nos va a
and
agarrar la
still
influenza
go forward
o
and
una
be
influenza
fine.
que no fuimos
And then
vacunados,
we
pero
could
si
get a
nos
flu
vacunamos
and that
en
we
todas
haven't
las
been
opciones,
vaccinated against.
saldremos
But if we
adelante en
vaccinate
varias de
all
estas
the
enfermedades.
time,
Esa es
we're going
la
to be
situación
doing a
actual.
lot better. That's the general situation.
No,
How
somos
many
sanos,
patients who are
vamos a decir.
asymptomatic? We're
O
all
somos,
healthy. We're healthy.
tenemos otras enfermedades,
We
pero
have other
la de,
diseases,
específicamente
but
la de ese virus,
specifically speaking about this virus,
SARS-CoV-2,
about
esa es la que vamos a
SARS-CoV-2, of
estar enfocando.
SARS-CoV-2,
No vamos a
that's the
descuidar
one that
las
we're
otras.
focusing
Ustedes
on. We're not going
preguntaron,
to
no
drop
podemos
the other
descuidar
ones. We're
toda
not going to let
la
them
gama
go by the
de
wayside.
vacunas que tenemos y de
We're still
inmunizaciones que se
working on
logran
other
con tratamientos.
vaccination programs.
Gracias. La
So,
compañera, por favor, allá atrás.
thank you.
Gracias. Buenas noches, mi
Thank you.
nombre es
Good
Ken
evening.
Oribe de Canal 6.
Hello, I'm Ken
Tengo tres
Oribe
preguntas
from Canal
rapidísimo. La
6.
primera,
Just a quick
nos han
question.
llegado las denuncias de desabasto
We
de
received some
sangre en cuestión de
reports
algunos hospitales, por
of lack
ejemplo,
of
el
blood
Hospital
supply
Juárez,
at
en
hospitals.
donde
For
dicen
example,
que
at
la
the
gente ya no
Hospital
quiere ir a donar
Juárez,
sangre ni
they're saying people
plaquetas
don't want to
por
go
miedo a que
donate
tienen un
plaquettes
espacio
or
para atender
blood
a pacientes de COVID. Aunque
because
están
they're
en
worried
una sección
about the
específica,
COVID
pues la gente
patients,
ya
even
no
though they're
quiere
in a
donar
specific
y los
area.
pacientes
People don't want to
oncológicos sobre todo
donate
pues están
blood,
padeciendo de esto.
especially
Número dos, he
oncological
visto algunas
patients are having a
investigaciones
hard time
de
with this
países
lack of
como
blood
Chile
supply.
ahorita que
And
relaciona
then we
estas
have
enfermedades
countries
también,
like Chile,
referentes a que el virus, ya lo han mencionado, puede entrar quizá
and
por los
they're
ojos y esto se
saying,
va
oh,
al
the
sistema
virus could go
sanguíneo
in
y puede
through our
causar una
eyes
reflejo.
and this could go
¿Qué
into your
sucede con
blood
eso? ¿Es
system and that
real?
could
¿No se han
cause
hecho las investigaciones?
thrombosis.
Y por último, si me podría mencionar,
And then,
¿se va a hacer
if you
alguna
could tell
campaña o algo
me,
para
is there
poder
a
conocer esta
campaign
guía para las
so that
personas
we
que, bueno,
can
necesiten una interpretación de
read
señas?
that
¿Cómo va a
guide
funcionar
for
esto de las
people who don't
videollamadas? ¿Se
need
va a hacer
an
una campaña o
interpreter, a sign
simplemente con la
language
guía y los ejemplos?
interpreter? How will
Gracias.
they be able to access the guide?
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Sobre las dos primeras
About
preguntas,
your first two questions,
también hemos invitado a nuestro
yes,
muy apreciado
we had
colega, doctor
also
Jorge
invited
Trejo
Dr.
Gómora, quien
Jorge
es el director
Tregumora.
general del Centro
He's the
Nacional de
general doctor
Transfusión
at
Sanguínea,
our
y aquí
National
explicó
Blood
con
Transfusion Center,
detalle
and he
cuáles son las
explained
previsiones que
in
tomamos hace
detail
varias semanas, son
what preventive
prácticamente 7
measures we are
semanas,
taking.
8
It's been 7
semanas,
or 8
para
weeks
que
now,
no hubiera escasez de
so that
sangre.
we don't
Y
have a
de hecho
blood shortage.
identificamos con antelación
We
que en
identified
México solamente
we
tenemos
identified
una
that in
muy
Mexico
reducida
we have a
contribución de la
reduced
transfusión
contribution for people donating blood out of the good of their heart. Now, we had a national blood acquiring system. We've had it for 37 years, more or less. And only 7% of donors donate in an altruistic capacity. All of these years that I've spoken of, we've passed to another way, which is really not that convenient, but we try to condition people in hospitals to donate in a practical way. For almost 4 decades now, blood availability has been an issue because it's not convenient in so many ways because people don't favor donation. But one of our doctors has been working specifically in that. And in terms of this COVID pandemic, he anticipated this challenge and he established a program exactly to support and encourage people to donate. And that's really going to help us now. And we're going to get more information on that. Could you comment on the guide? Yes, the guide is published. It's in the disability section on the coronavirus.gov.mx. And it's also in a documents area for health professionals. And we're also circulating it on social media so that the highest number of people can access this information. And it's explained with videos and audios that are talking about how this connection with civil society is going to work so that Mexican Sign Language interpreters can support us and help people who need it so that they'll be able to communicate with healthcare services. Now, Dr. Jorge Trejo wrote me an answer right now. He said the Hospital Juarez today, there are 86 red bags of red blood cells and 617 of free plasma. So there is no shortage in Hospital Juarez. Well, I was saying that maybe 50 donors arrive and only 4 want to donate. So we're a bit worried about. Thank you for your question. Let's make an appeal. Hey, everyone's listening right now. Please donate blood. Donate blood. It's very important to donate. We need voluntary donors, of course. Donors. We need more donors at our blood banks. And we have accredited blood donation centers at our hospitals. It's very important during the COVID pandemic because, of course, a lot of activities change, and of course, maybe there's less availability of blood. And it's very important for us to have blood for many treatments that have nothing to do with COVID. It's very important for us to have blood. So please, I would like to appeal to all of you to donate blood. Okay, that's it. We don't have any time left. Okay, great. So we'll see you tomorrow. Dr. Cortez, did you want to make the announcement? Okay, and just to close our press conference for today, for all the children, all the girls and boys, thank you so much for participating. More than 3,500 of you participated. Girls, boys, and adolescents from different cultures, with disabilities, without, from all over the country. You guys are doing great jobs as champions with putting up with all of this. And tomorrow we're going to interact with you. Well, you're going to interact with Dr. Gatel at 7 on the dot. Thank you, Dr. Jorge Alcocer. He was here in his capacity as minister, but also as an internal oncologist. Thank you. Thank you.